back to WagerTalk.com. I'm Marco D'Angelo, joined in studio today with Brian Leonard and Ralph Michaels. We're going to break down the conference championship games. Guys, let's start with Minnesota and Philadelphia. Last week, Philadelphia played like a team that had a chip on their shoulder, and, well, they should. They were the number one seed, underdog at home, first round of the playoffs, something we hadn't seen before, and we talked about that last week. Philly went out and got the job done. Can they do it again, guys? I'll start with you, Brian. What did you make of last week's game and moving forward into this week?
Yeah, I liked Philly last week, and I think it's very similar to this week. Originally, the Atlanta line was a little bit higher, and then we saw a lot of Philly money come in. We've already seen some Philly money coming in this week again. It's not like either one of these quarterbacks are outstanding. So to make the home underdog a 3-point favorite, or excuse me, 3-point underdog, it's a little bit crazy in my regard at this point, but it was 3.5 earlier, and all the wise guys took that out. It's interesting because just a couple of weeks ago, we really didn't know who the home field advantage was going to go to in this game because both teams were both fighting for it. If the game had been played in Minnesota, I think it'd be much better for Minnesota because they are the dome team, and dome teams traveling to non-dome teams have not done well in the playoffs. We saw that last week with Atlanta. And if you take a look at Minnesota so far, they've played pretty well on the road, but take a look at some of the teams that they played, the Packers, the Bears, the Browns in London. They haven't really beaten quality teams on the road. I think that's an advantage for Philadelphia. But once again, you've got the Philadelphia team that's not the best quarterback in the playoffs, probably the worst when you take a look at it. And when you got Blake Bortles out of the group of four, that's not saying much.
Not to totally disagree with you, but as far as on the road, this Minnesota Viking team, they've got one of the best defenses in all of football, and defenses seem to travel well. And you look at that one stretch they had in November, late November, was a horrible stretch for them. They had a 3-game road trip, and that 3-game road trip had Detroit on Thanksgiving Day. Then they go to Atlanta the next week, which was the Super Bowl team loser last year, and then a Carolina team that was life and death fighting for their playoff spot. So they did have a 3-game stretch, and what did they do? They won 2 out of 3, and the one game they lost to Carolina was the only bad game. They had 3 turnovers, and since the middle of November, this team has had until last week. It only had 4 turnovers since the middle of November, and 3 of them came in one game. Ralph, I'll go to you. This defense, and they're going to be facing Nick Foles. And last week, we made a lot of comments about did they over-adjust the line because from Carson Wentz to Nick Foles. Now, obviously, the couple games that we got to see of Foles, the Eagles didn't play the way they were playing with Carson Wentz, but was it an over-adjustment? Now we're looking this week. We're basically supposed to be getting a better team in Minnesota, but we're looking at not much difference in the line, only 0.5 point. How are you looking at it?
Well, the line is the adjustment that the Eagles made. I mean, they showed that they can play at home, and I actually agree with Brian in this. Minnesota's 2 different teams. At home with the dome noise, their rush defense is just incredible. 58 yards per game rushing, 2.3 yards per carry at home. They only allowed 6 opponents to rush for 100 or more yards. All 6 were on the road. And away from home this year, Minnesota's giving up 112 yards per game, 4.3 yards per carry. A completely different defense away from home. Foles now has the experience, and you got to remember, Foles is a person who started 40 games in the NFL. He's not a young, inexperienced quarterback. We saw him in the second half last week when the run game worked, how he was able to stretch that defense, and he performed very well. In this situation, I truly am I am a home fan. I think Minnesota right now is looking ahead to be the first ever Super Bowl team to host their own. You have a team that had a chip on their shoulder from being a home dog. They're a home dog again. And I think you have a very good defense. Philadelphia's defense is number 4 at home. I'll take that situation with that quarterback against Case Keenum on the road.
All right, so it's my job to try to tip the scales. You guys are both on Philadelphia.
If we're all on the scales.
Well, I'll tell you, if you two are on one side of the scale and I'm on the other side, I got to do some serious talk here to balance that seesaw. And I'm on Minnesota, and I disagree with you guys. And what I'm looking at with this one here is last week, I think Atlanta came in a little bit overconfident with the game. They won the game at the Rams. They shut down the league's highest scoring team. And we talked about that game. That was an inexperienced quarterback. We said as good as Jared Goff had been all season, until he shows me that he can do it in a playoff game, I'm from Missouri. You got to show me first. I'll take that attitude. Also the fact, Philadelphia, as I opened the video with that chip on their shoulder. Well, last week was the statement game. I know they're still an underdog this week, but they showed last week that they could do it. And let's think about it. The last week of the regular season, first of all, the odds makers disrespected them, making them a home dog. The public wanted Atlanta in that game. And then think about the last week of the regular season. The Saints were fighting for the division and the number 3 seed. The Rams were currently in the 4th spot, but had a chance to get the number 3 seed if they won and the Saints lost. They didn't want the 3 seed. They wanted the 4 seed. The Rams rested all of their starters. Why? Because if they win their first game, they wanted to draw Philadelphia rather than draw the Minnesota-New Orleans winner. So they were disrespected all the way around, and now I think that they don't have as much of that drive. And I look at Philadelphia, and or Minnesota, I don't want to use a cliche here, but let's talk about it. That last play that they won, they have an opportunity to be the first team to ever play a home game for a Super Bowl. You want to talk about team of destiny? They might be that in the fact that they did win the game in the fashion that they did. And it's not like they were out of that game the whole way. They dominated that game for most of the game. They led most of the game until we had the 3 lead changes in the final 3 minutes of that game. And I think it gave Case Keenum more confidence. He only made one bad play in that game, and it was a bad one. The interception he threw was horrible. But I like this team. I like the defense. We badmouthed Atlanta how many times during the season that they underachieved all year. Minnesota hasn't. I like the Vikings. I think they shut Philadelphia down this week, and we'll be looking at Minnesota for the first time as a home team in a Super Bowl. And it'll be an underdog to the Patriots.
Just because Marco spoke last, really don't listen to him. I mean, he's allowed to give his point of view. It's going to be wrong, but we allow him to have his point of view.
There you go. All right, you got 2 votes for Philadelphia, 1 vote for Minnesota. You decide which one you like. And guys, don't forget, every Monday at Wager Talk, it's Manic Monday. You can get any play at Wager Talk for just $9. It's the best deal going. Check it out each and every Monday, Manic Monday. And don't forget, if you like these videos, hit the thumbs up button. Like us on Facebook, share it, YouTube, subscribe on the channel, and share it with all of your friends. Build up our subscriber list. We appreciate it. We'll be back with more here at WagerTalk.com.